in a new house in a new town that I set up yesterday. And if there's an echo, I apologize because I have no absorbing material anywhere.
Back to the old days when we started like 6 years ago or something. How's your Wi-Fi broadband? Is that okay?
Yes, broadband. I have the fiber, so that should be okay.
Yeah, guys, hi. We're recording already. Obviously, as always, surprise, surprise. We're back after what? 4 months? I think we should do these now as the Grand Tour. They do specials. So now layovers, we do specials whenever we have like 5 minutes to ourselves. We do an episode. So sorry guys. It was my fault to be frank. We wanted to record in June. Then we both had the jab, which is good now because for 4 months afterwards we're fully protected. And then I had a shitty month of July, to be frank, didn't want to record. And then August, you were in love and doing your tour of the US. I said, you know what? I'm not going to ask him to do an episode. And then September, well, you just heard it. Alex moved house and I'm moving next week.
Yes, actually. That's very exciting.
We just found this little window between two moves to record one. It's going to be not as long as usual, but we still wanted to record something because a lot of people have been like wondering, well, the hell are you guys? So you've been to the US, actually, for quite a long time.
Yes, I have. I was there for most of the summer and did some internal travels there. And then I just went back earlier in the month for work, which is novel, traveling for work.
And also, I should mention that Alex spent at least probably 2 months trying to figure out to do a recipe with Sainsbury corn flour from the 1980s. Yes. I don't know where the hell did you find that?
I found it in my grandmother's cupboard, which is a treasure trove for long expired cooking materials.
And did you try it?
I didn't. No, I like being alive. But there was a lot of debate about when that actually was from. So it was a pretty amusing little exercise to go through.
I think it's from like the early 80s, but maybe I could be wrong because I was obviously not living in this country. But it felt from the kind of design. Guys, if you don't know what we're talking about, where did you put that?
I think it was an Instagram story. I'll post it on Instagram properly because, it did generate a lot of conversation for an expired baking product,
Well, to a certain extent, it's very on point because that's where we were going back to the early 80s. Because do you have enough fuel?
Oh,
petrol,
my God, dude. I caught a break yesterday and I glanced over at a petrol station on my way to pick up my kids and there was no queue. And I thought, well, they must have run out of fuel. Nope. But then by the time I left, there were 100 cars behind me. So,
oh my God.
Yes. What a predictable mess this is.
Yeah, soon enough we'll see 737s lining up for fuel as well. If you don't know why we're referencing to it, I don't know, guys, where you've been. Even if you don't live in the UK, we have fuel shortages. Actually, not fuel shortage, but lack of drivers that bring the fuel to the stations. And of course, as soon as the government said, do not panic buy, everybody started panic buying. And now you have queues for hours trying to get fuel and they run out every day. It's just a freaking nightmare. Anyway, let's start with good news. I'm going to play the little thing to say that we actually are recording.
Just want to tell you both good luck. We're all counting on you.
So, and right after that, the music, the intro music, the short intro music that you guys probably missed. There you go. So, Alex, let's start with good stuff. You have so many flights, so much travel that you've done during this Delta United American Airlines pandemic. I still haven't been in a single aircraft nor airport. It's been like 19 months now. I'm not really missing it. I know it doesn't feel right to say it on a aviation podcast, but so let's start with good stuff. I don't know where you want to start. We didn't take any notes, guys. This is just riffing off. So I'm going to ask him, where do you want to start? What do you want to talk about?
Well, it's such a weird relationship now, isn't it? Like with flying, you saying you don't miss it. I think that the airport experience is completely different, even though now it's starting to get more and more
normal.
Back to the way it was. But I don't think it'll ever get back to the way it was. And it just feels it's not the same relaxing sense of excitement, and even though what's ahead of you, and you can contextualize it within your own joy, if you know what I mean. Like you don't have to take all the external stimuli and let that sour the joy of wherever it is you may be going, but it's definitely different. And I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, and there's a few standout moments and discoveries and things. But the first one, I mean, almost resulted in none of this happening in the first place, because I was flying with my kids back to California in mid-July.
Yeah.
And it was in the first wing of BA, which was busy because everybody was doing the same thing that I was doing. They were all just like, right, let's GTFO and go to one of the few places that we can go. I had to administer nasal swabs to all three of my kids on camera for one of those services that I think I've described in the past.
Yeah.
My middle son was like, whatever, I got to do this. My eldest son, who's just turned 11 a couple of days ago, was like, this is the worst thing anybody has ever done to me, and I'm never going to forgive you. And then with my 3-year-old, I had to I said to the guy on the camera, I'm going to mute you because this is going to sound like I'm trying to, decapitate a hyena. So I just muted it and I did it. Anyway, but they had to to get into the U.S. It's 2 and under. You have to do an antigen test. Coming into the UK, not so much anymore. But got to the airport, checking in. The lady's very, very kind lady was checking us in. She's like, "Do you have your kids' birth certificates?" I'm like,
"What?
No, I don't have my kids' birth certificates. I'm American." And she's like, "Oh, okay, that should be fine. That should be fine." She's like, tapping away, calls somebody, and she's like, "Okay." And then she says, and this is where my heart sank. She said, "I need to call somebody from Homeland." And I was like, I've never heard that before. What's
You're
Homeland?
on a watch list, Alex.
Well,
no, I'm kidding, obviously.
no, I mean, it was, and I thought, this isn't, and I'm looking at my clock going, and my watch going, because there was really bad traffic on. I'm like, I can't get home. My kids' birth certificates are in storage. There's no way I can get there in time. Wow. So this lady comes up, in a not in a BA uniform, American, works for the Department of State, actual Homeland Security. This is not a BA department called
Homeland. Movie, man.
This is the United States Homeland Security. She said, "Can I see your passports? Where are you going? Why are you going?" The lady was very nice. She was just doing her job, and she's like, "There's the presidential not edict or mandate or whatever that says basically you can't come in unless you've got the kids' birth certificates. You can prove that they're yours." And I was like,
"Look at them; they look like me."
Yeah, and also I'm like, I've got my eldest son has an American passport. My 2 younger ones don't. And she's like, "Can you go get the birth certificate?" I was like, "No, I can't. It's just I can't. It's not going to work." And I'm thinking, the knock-on effects of this are legion. And she goes, "Hold on a second." She calls, and she's got this special PDA smartphone thing where she's scanning our passports, like the RFID or NFC, whatever it is, technology. She's got all the passport information. She calls somebody up, and she's like, She goes, 1 minute, types something into her phone and goes, "This never happened. Enjoy your trip."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Just go."
You don't ask questions, just go.
And so I get on the flight, and we get to California, and the whole time I'm thinking, what's going to happen when I get to California, to San Francisco?
Of course, yeah.
I would rather have had to go home and get my, the kids' birth certificates and come back 24 hours later than get to San Francisco with 3 tired, pissed off kids and be denied entry.
Yeah. Of course.
And so we get to San Francisco. Immigration people are invariably nice at San Francisco. At least that's been my experience. The guy was really chipper. He's like, "Okay, great. Welcome back, blah, 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 blah." He's like, "Follow me for a second." And I was like, "Oh, here we go." And we go to the immigration processing detention room, which I've been in before for various other reasons. And I'm thinking, here we go. And there's all these other people in the same situation as us, or they've lost passports or their passports are expired or whatever. And I'm thinking we're going to be here for hours and hours and hours. About an hour goes by, and they just say, "Oh, looks like we've got a note from London here. You've been pre-processed. Next time, you'll avoid all of this in the future if you just bring the kids' birth." Again, very pleasant, very kind, no problem. But the lady did what she said she was going to do. She did something on her end.
Yeah, to actually fast track you or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she's, so that was a sort of heartburn way to begin the trip. But it's, I don't imagine there's a whole lot of people listening that are in the same situation as mine. But if you're traveling with children that are yours but aren't citizens of the U.S., bring their frickin' birth certificates. That was a stressful and unique interaction. I can't imagine it's going to happen to me ever again.
Yeah, that demonstrates how, like you said, the paperwork that needs to be done still to this day, right? I mean, half of the world is still closed, but to the ones that are open, I have friends who came from the US to Europe as soon as Europe opened up for Americans. Now it closed again a little bit. If you're vaccinated, it's fine. Sweden says no matter if you're vaccinated or not, you cannot enter as an American citizen. No way, Jose. So there are still some rules, but it's a paperwork. Yeah. And the paperwork makes no sense. I have a friend of mine went simply to Switzerland, came back. So it was at a time when, so in the UK, you need, like you just said, you need pre-flight test on the way back and then a test when you're here. That's going to change, but currently it's still the case. And the pre-flight test, you have all these, you use, I think, Cured, is that the one you were using? Yes. There's all these names. I mean, some of them are crooks and scammers, but I mean, most of them work okay. And the person was using Cured, so the one you're using, because they asked me, so which one? And I said, my friend Alex used Cured and he's happy with it. So they used that. And it worked really well. The only issue is that Swiss, the airline, said, but we need a QR code. And Cured wasn't providing QR codes, we're just providing a certificate, which is a printed certificate, but it didn't contain a QR code. And they were wanting to deny boarding to that person. And then they called Cured, and Cured said, we don't do QR codes, but we can do that on demand, but you need to ask us 48 hours before. And you have these little things that are not, because nowhere on the English UK website is there a mention of a QR code. It just mentions you need to have a test that is negative. And so you have all these little things that makes travel so anxiety prone for so many people because you don't know. And imagine if you haven't traveled. I mean, probably me, I'll have some anxiety like you just mentioned, but some people that are not used to travel, and then suddenly you arrive at the airport and you're denied, or you like want paperwork or whatever. It's just, man.
Yeah. And what I've noticed in traveling reasonably frequently over the last 12 months is that every single time it's different. Even on the same route, the requirement is different. The paperwork is, especially going into the US and into the UK.
Yeah.
And that's compounded by deviations in process at different airports in the same country.
Yeah.
And then also made worse, and I don't blame them for this, by check-in agents not being fully up to date with requirements.
And I'm wondering if sometimes the airlines are not fully up to, no, it's not, the information doesn't go down.
No, that's exactly what it is. And I've tried to exhibit as much patience as I can.
Of course.
Because I think perhaps I mentioned in the last time we recorded, I did this once, and the lady who was checking me in at the BA First Wing, it was her first day back after 9 months of furlough. Yeah. And of course she's drinking from the fire hose because there's so many different requirements. I mean, you think about the destinations that BA flies to, and every single one of those countries is going to have a different piece of paperwork and a different, and you've had these. And also, sorry to interrupt, but also it seems from many friends that have been traveling mostly in Europe, because again, there's not a lot of places we can go anyway.
The US is still closed for Europeans, unless like you have a US passport, and there are like a very few number of exceptions. I think, of course, Boris Johnson was able to go to the UN Assembly in New York, so it's still close to us. But the trend that I have heard over and over is that because it's slightly more people are traveling. It's still not back to anything remotely in 2019, but the airlines are getting more responsibility because the governments are saying you need to check all the paperwork when they board so that they're pre-checked, so we don't have to have massive queues like you've experienced probably at Heathrow. They want to have all that cleared, so the test, the proof of location forms, whatever. And I've seen that over and over. Like friends of mine would told me that Germany, about Switzerland, about other countries. So the becomes on that check-in person,
yes,
to make sure
which is
that
a lot of
everything
pressure
is
to
there.
put on a person, in that position. They've trained or spent most of their career doing a very specific role, and now they are, they're vanguards for that for health monitoring and disease prevention, and you're right. You come back into Heathrow now, and there's no check of any of that stuff. They don't check your passenger locator form or your vaccination status. That's all much further upstream. And there's intermediary apps that have come in, like Verifly, which have made the airlines' jobs easier because they offload a lot of those verification processes to these companies like Verifly. So that helps. And again, now with the US opening up to the EU or the broader European continent
next month
in November, then I think...
by the way, we should mention that we're recording this on the 29th of September 2021. I mean, it's going to be released today, so you guys know. But I think it's November that they're opening.
November, yeah. They haven't set a specific date.
The date, yeah.
But that's going to change things a lot as well, so that it'll be very interesting to watch. I'm not planning on going. Well, actually, I am going to the US in November, but I don't know if it'll be before or after that as those restrictions are lifted. So we'll see. But I mean, the flights that I've been taking to the US from the UK have been very, very empty.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, you're looking at maybe, I don't know, 30%. On the way back, however, I've been on flights where I think the business class cabin has been completely full.
Because it's open, you can actually come.
You can, and of course, if you're just going over for work, then people being vaccinated, they feel confident to do that. But then on my flight back from LA a couple of weeks ago, it was sort of the economy cabin was maybe 40% full.
Okay.
So
I think
that's the gamut.
It's important that you mentioned that because I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, as you guys know, which is ironic for someone like you and me doing podcasts. But I'm hearing a lot of very US-centric podcasts that say, we're pretty much back. Of course, it's dipped down because of the Delta variant. And it's true. I mean, and you've experienced that, and you'll tell us about stories because you've done domestic flights, surely. I mean, I know one because he sent me actually a picture because that was a landmark one.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little bit later about it. But if you look at the numbers, globally, people are still not traveling. Businesses are still not sending their employees for work. There are a few. But if the view from the US, because it's a big domestic market, it's probably very similar to a view from internal domestic China, is that, people are traveling. Yeah, but as soon as you started to cross borders, which is the case in Europe, even though the EU is kind of a unitary system, people are still not traveling. It's better, but it's still not even close to late 2019, right? So I think it's something that unless you actually experience it, you don't realize. I mean, you can watch the numbers. Obviously, IATA publishes them every month or something. But yeah. So go on. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. So keep on whichever story you want to tell. No, you're right. I mean, I think it's what's interesting to me is to see. I think you have two indicators of volume, as far as I'm concerned. You have three maybe. You've got the general airport, right? There's the amount of people, the hustle and bustle queues at security, queues at check-in. Then you've got the lounges, especially for somewhere like T5. I think that's a really interesting Are they all open now?
Not in the remote terminals.
Yeah, so that also concentrates a number of people in the open.
Yeah.
Right?
And so, I mean, when I went to the US 2 weeks ago, the BA first class lounge was back to what it was always like, where you had to walk around for a little bit and find a seat. It was that busy. granted, they have removed, I would say, 30% of the seating for social distancing, which I appreciate. And you order your food. I think we've talked about this using a QR code, and that's a little bit more self-service is coming back for things like coffee and water and stuff like that. And then, of course, the flights themselves. And between the three of those, you can get a reasonable sense of how travel is going. And Heathrow is generally getting more and more bustling. But the U.S. is crazy. I mean, I did a lot of internal flying over the last 3 months in the U.S., and it's very interesting because the flights all feel rammed. I did Seattle on Alaskan, it was an ex-Virgin America airplane with the soul sucked out of it. We did it in first, and it was good enough, and it just a very easy flight up, and went to the Air and Space Museum there. Of course, the Museum of Flight there was really interesting. Actually, was seeing all the 737 Maxes parked on the parking lot. We've talked about this a lot. We've seen pictures, but on the parking lot behind the museum, seeing all of these 737s, because of course, and we can talk about this more later, it's still not certified in China. So a lot of them were Chinese airlines. And then seeing all these 777X test beds at Everett. I think that maybe there was 5 all parked, ready to go run through all of their testing procedures. It's a very beautiful airplane to see in person. So I'm excited
very jealous
for those to take to the sky. And then to Hawaii.
That's our airport of the day, basically, because you've done LIH. I don't even know what's the name of the airport, but you'll describe it probably near the end. But go on.
So that was interesting for a number of reasons, mainly because of a discovery I made. So we flew from Oakland. Megan and I flew from Oakland to Lihue, which is about five and a half hours. And you take off out of Oakland, you turn left over San Francisco, and then you fly over the Pacific for 5 hours.
Okay. Nice.
And there's nothing at all. And that just kind of gripped me. And I just sat there staring out the window for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, going, gosh, there's really nothing. There's nothing until we get to Hawaii.
Was it your first time in Hawaii, or
second time in Hawaii?
Oh, okay.
This is the first time sans kids where I can have a moment to sort of look out the window and reflect, and just go. There's this vastness, and so I thought, I wonder if anybody's written a book about the Pacific Ocean. Of course, there's this wonderful book by Simon Winchester called Pacific, which I strongly recommend everybody read. It's basically a biography of the Pacific Ocean, but just the scale of it. And he uses I think it's United Airlines Flight 147, which is the island hopper down all the way to Guam, as the sort of the narrative vehicle for the book. Of course, while there's no Wi-Fi or anything, so I'm just looking out the window and reading and everything. And then every time when we're in Hawaii and relaxing, of course, every time a plane flies over, I've got flight radar going. I wonder where they're going. And of course, all of the intra-island activity, the Hawaiian 717s and all of that. But then, of course, you've got these cargo flights going to tiny little islands in the Pacific. And the thread that I pulled was that I looked at a flight that was going from, I don't know, Sacramento, some Air Force base, to Guam or something. I don't know. And it was being tracked by Oakland. And I thought, that's odd. Maybe that's an error. It wasn't. And this is where I dug into, and this blew my mind.
This is how you spend your holiday.
This is how I spend my holidays.
Enjoying the beach.
Much to Megan's chagrin. Although she does humor me with stuff like this. So Oakland Center, or Oakland Oceanic, is an air traffic control facility, which actually is not in Oakland. It's in Fremont, just south. It's in basically a warehouse. You wouldn't know it was anything other than, some manufacturing thing if you didn't know what it was. It covers about 140,000 square miles of the western U.S., Northern California, some Nevada. But it also covers 19 million square miles of the Pacific Ocean. That's 9.5% of the Earth's total surface.
Holy cow.
Everything above 5,000 feet air traffic is monitored out of this place. So that makes it the largest area control center in the world by controlled space. So it goes from basically where I mentioned, Vegas, as far south as just north of New Zealand, and as far west as just east of the Philippines.
Wow.
And it's any aircraft above 5,000 feet in that 19 million square miles is controlled out of this. So as soon as you leave Hawaii, you're talking to Oakland. As soon as you leave Guam, you're talking to Oakland. As soon as you leave, Tahiti, you're talking to, and you're bound for North America, you're talking to Oakland. The scale is mind blowing. I couldn't. It took me a long time to appreciate it. And there's all these wonderful FAA documents and diagrams showing just how huge it is. It's by far the biggest. The next one is the Southern Caribbean.
So do you mean? Let me get this straight. So when I flew, it was 11 years ago, I flew to Hawaii. I flew from Tokyo with Delta, pretty sure, to Honolulu. You mean that I was probably in that?
So the Japanese, this is a really good question. The Japanese center picks up at sort of, in terms of longitude, it's just sort of north of Papua New Guinea.
Okay.
And then, Oakland comes in like just east of Korea in terms of longitude.
Wow. So I'm even left wondering, when I was doing the runs from Manila to Tokyo, since I was flying on, again, Northwest back in the day, and then Delta, maybe. So
that's all controlled from, you would have passed through maybe a corner of Oakland, but then the rest of that space is controlled by out of Fukuoka. So this was like just a rabbit hole that I went down. And
guys, you now understand why I didn't want to bother Alex to do a podcast in the middle of August, because he was doing that kind of things and he was like deep into knowledge for when this podcast would come back.
It was just fascinating to me, and it's the scale of it. And you sit there and you listen to live ATC, and I had it running in the background when I would be working or something, and you'd listen to Oakland Center. And, you'd have somebody climbing out of, 10,000 feet from Honolulu, and also somebody being handed off to Vegas. Going to Midway, just the scale of it blew my mind. And that's sort of expounded in this 600-page book as well. It's quite a place. I mean, the flight to Hawaii was and back were reasonably uneventful. It's a A321neo. Hawaiian Airlines.
Hawaiian Airlines.
Which is, I like them. I think they're really a solid airline. They give you full meal service for free. They don't have Wi-Fi. They have streaming to the device. The service is really friendly.
Were you in economy, right?
In economy, yeah. They got hammered because the COVID restrictions kept changing, and the rental car situation was really bad there because...
a friend of mine is a tour operator in Honolulu, actually.
Don't envy him.
This is the reason actually I'm up to date about what's happening, even though I'm not on Facebook or on Instagram. I'm on his newsletter. And I kept it even if I don't go because he's a friend. And currently, they are the only ones in the US that have truly these COVID passes. So you need to enter hospitality, bars, restaurants. That's only like a few weeks now. So probably not where you were there. They require either proof of vaccination, or you need to be tested every 24 hours or something. Like, it's really in Europe, not in the UK, but in Europe, we have some countries. We'll come to that later, having that, because that impacts obviously travel. But they're very strict, and they had also at some point the governor, I don't know if that's the term, also said please do not come here.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, I mean, the protocol for getting into Hawaii was strict. I mean, when we got to Oakland Airport, there was a long queue, and I thought, oh, it's a good thing we're hand luggage only. It wasn't a queue for check-in. It was a queue for COVID vaccination status. So Megan could just show her vaccination card, her U.S. vaccination card. But the requirement for Hawaii is that you must have been vaccinated in the U.S. to be able to do that.
Oh, no way.
So for me, I had to go and get a PCR COVID test from one of their providers. I had to upload it. It then generates a QR code. And then you show the QR code to the check-in agent. They scan it. It's associated with your PNR.
Yeah.
And they give you a wristband when you check in. And then when you land in Hawaii, you're funneled into wristbanded versus not wristbanded people. And if you're free to go if you've been, but they are very, very strict because it's an island in the middle of the Pacific that is utterly dependent on tourism. One slip up and they are toast.
Yeah, and also they have less, probably, and maybe I'm making this up, they have less capacity of, like we've seen stories in the US, but also in Europe as well, though Delta was earlier in Europe than in the US, which is still happening in the US also because the US has less vaccination than Europe now, but that they were transferring, basically they were managing between states or they were transferring. Hawaii cannot do that. At some point, they are on an island, so you cannot just say, oh, we have extra capacity in San Francisco. That just doesn't happen. Whereas if you're inland, you probably can do. There were stories actually about that. I don't. Maybe I'm making this up, but of course they're more. They would be more strict. I know that some people decry that, but I
think because being an island allows them, I think, to be stricter. And being such a unique and attractive place, although we'll talk about Las Vegas a little bit later.
Did you compare? Did you just compare Las Vegas with Hawaii? What is wrong with you?
Well, yeah, Hawaii is the place I think everybody wanted to get to in the U.S. because it was domestic. There wasn't, but you still had to go through all of these, these things. So it was a very interesting, process to try and understand that. And I had to go, like I said, and do this at a very specific testing center. And they're very strict about what Hawaii as a state, about what they will accept in terms of testing and certification. If you try and get a COVID test in the U.S., you'll often see them say, not acceptable for travel to Hawaii, because Hawaii has been very specific about what they will and will not accept. And
actually, it's the case in Europe as well.
Yeah.
There are different requirements for different. Again, now if you are vaccinated in Europe or with a vaccine that is accepted in Europe, and we'll come to that as well. I mentioned it in the previous episode, but that creates a bit of issue. But there are test requirements that are slightly different. Like, I think something to do with the number of cycles of PCR or something like that. And some countries just do lateral flows and it's fine. Some other require PCR, which are more time-consuming to do and more expensive, obviously. So it's not standardized, and that is not easy. At least Hawaii, I guess it's you need to find the right test, but I guess it was not too hard for you to find.
I know I had to drive out to Oakland, which wasn't the end of the world, and it was a drive-through test administered by somebody else, and it wasn't cheap, but they did what they said they were going to do.
Okay.
And it's a small price to pay for being just as an aside, we were in Kauai, which is one of the islands, and it was just incredible paradise.
I've never, because my only experience is Honolulu, and I've been to, of course, like a tourist to Waikiki. It's not as I ventured out in the more less urban settings, and that was really wonderful. But I'll admit that I don't know the other islands, and I mostly stayed in a very urban setting, which was okay, but it felt like a piece of the U.S. put on a Pacific island, which is, maybe I'm too privileged. I've seen so many islands that I found that nice, but not overly nice.
Yeah.
Though the other bits that were completely full of void of humans, basically, that was amazing. But I only just did like a day tour, if you want.
Yeah. It's some of the islands are definitely like that. This one is very tropical, very jungly. It's where they filmed a lot of Jurassic Park. And The Descendants with George Clooney. So we went to the bar where some of that was filmed, and of course the airport features heavily. But yeah, paradise. And I am a fan of Hawaiian Airlines in terms of product. Their IT infrastructure, or web infrastructure, I should say, was infuriating. And but I think they were just behind the curve with all of this stuff. But I liked them as an airline. The plane was clean and it's a Neo, so it's nice and quiet and comfortable, and 5.5 hours just kind of blows by. But that was an interesting.
It's nice. It's interesting what you said, because I'm using your thread to jump with anecdotes that I've seen. I know you've been using the BA website and or app quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And to be frank, although we know that they are plagued with IT woes, I comparatively to a lot of other European airlines, I find the information provided for testing and the simple fact that you directly have links with sometimes discounts to test providers is something that others are not doing. Just go on, again, I'm going to use the same example as previously. If you go to on Swiss.com, which is the Switzerland airline, obviously, there's nothing. You have no idea what you're doing. You have no idea what you're supposed to do arriving in Switzerland. There's no link. Even there's a copy-paste, a badly copy-paste from the IATA probably database, which I say badly copy-paste because it's not formatted. So you read and you're like, where's the full point in that sentence? And you read 5 times what are the requirements, and then you have to end up going to the Swiss government and then the canton, let's say Geneva or Zurich, and to see what, because they also have their own requirements, a bit like the US states. And whilst on the opposite, I find that BAs tried at least to give information about what you are supposed to do. Maybe you'll counter us, it's not the case, but I found the website, maybe because the restrictions in the UK were so heavy that in order to put people in seats, BA was trying to do something, whereas it feels that some of the European airlines had basically the same website as in 2019, and to the point we were saying earlier about being a bit lost in paperwork. If you don't have a guidance from the airline where that should be, I know they will tell you need to go to the website of the government, but try to find a website of the government of the Polish Warsaw, and you're like, I'm not even sure what can you not just give me the basics of what I should be doing?
Yeah.
It's still bad.
You're right. BA is good about that. And
kudos for once.
Yeah, no, agreed. There's American Airlines use a company called Sherpa.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. But man, I've been pitched by the guy like 3 years ago. Yeah, I remember them very well. Oh wow.
Yeah, they use Sherpa, which is basically visa and now travel restriction information.
Yeah, they were. So the way they pitched it was because of the emergence of all these electronic authorization for travel. So ESTA in the US, but now the EU is implementing its own coming next year, Japan coming next year, Russia coming next year. So basically we have this system when you need to basically fill a form, and they were trying to help you navigate all this and it was a great idea. And of course, I didn't follow up, but of course it makes sense that they would add this health component on it. Wow.
Yeah, it's good. And you put in, where you're going from, where you're going to, round trip connections and all of that, what your vaccination status is, and it will tell you what you're arriving into, and it's it's cool. It's cool. But you're right. I think BA have negotiated discounts with all of the major testing providers, both at home and at airport. And it, when it was expensive, it really took the sting out of it. So they've done a good job with it. But one of the things that I realized is that in terms of app, just quality, the big American airlines are truly outstanding. And just what you can, we've talked about this for the last 5 years, but being able to change your seat or upgrade and all of the alerts and notifications that you get through them, are just maps and how to get to your gate and blah 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 blah. They're very good. They're very good, and they continue to improve. So that's an interesting. I don't travel on other airlines in the EU or in Europe enough to compare BA to like Swiss or Lufthansa or anybody else.
Well, I would say Lufthansa was always pretty good. Again, for me, my experience is pre-COVID now. I still have the app and I check it sometimes because they send me a notification that, don't you want to travel? Don't you want to travel? Because of course I'm gold and they keep renewing me. And so probably on some they try to tease me. It's still better. It's one of the best probably in Europe. But I only tried American Airlines and United when I was in the US, and again that's pre-COVID, and I found at least the design we can argue forever, but the number of features, like you just said, is amazing. Like just knowing where the flight is currently, without us going to one of our apps that tracks flights, they just give it to you, right? They said, it's delayed, so right? It's amazing.
Yeah, and all for plane nerds like us, like what's the plane and blah 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 blah. But yeah, so I've been impressed by that general app ecosystem in the US, and that's an arms race, right? I mean, I think they're catering to their frequent flyers who want that information and can and want to make changes and want to apply for upgrades and without having to go to a desk. And of course, now more than ever, we want to avoid going to desks or anything like that. So it's interesting to experience.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, are you able at all to do online checking or mobile app checking, or you still have to every single time go to a desk to prove your vaccination status, forms, etc.?
Well, see, that was what was interesting. Whenever you flew to the US from the UK, and I'm sure it was the same for many other countries, even if you were hand luggage only, you had to have your document checked and scanned. Yeah. And so you had to go to a check-in desk. Exactly. Now with Verifly, you can check in online for the US.
That's for American Airlines, right?
For the British Airways and American Airlines.
Yeah.
Theoretically. So they say, I'm going to be going to the US next week, and I will test this theory. Because I haven't had it work yet for me.
Yeah, so you haven't tried because BA was saying that they wanted to introduce the IATA Travel Pass for selected routes, and so you haven't been given the chance to try that one.
I haven't tried that. I've tried Verifly a number of times, and I like it. This one that Hawaiian Airlines or the state of Hawaii uses is called Common Pass.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I know about this one.
Same deal. It generates a COVID QR code, so it would have helped your friend flying out of on Swiss, and it's pretty interesting. Maybe I'll post a screenshot of this if there's any information in here that was. I shouldn't be revealing.
It's not recorded. Only I can see it. Don't worry.
But you can.
If was this like now I can see, yeah.
Anyway, my camera there we go, supposed to autofocus.
Yeah, there you
go. It's got like what kind of test and where and by whom and blah blah blah. So
yeah, that's good.
It's
obviously we knew that since the start. This is where it's going to go, right? It's going to be streamlined, hopefully because all this paperwork thing, nobody wants to do it. Neither the passenger, neither the airlines. The airports want people just to put their phone or on a scanner and just walk through. So I think it's just about getting the right tool that is constantly updated with the latest information, every state requirements, et cetera, and you have this as a streamline, and that should be obviously integrated within the airline app or website, because this is what will actually end up at some point making people want to fly. They don't want to overthink this. A lot of people are not flying. Of course, there's still, concerns about some state of the virus, clearly, but it's simply because it's just a nightmare still to do it. It's not easy to do it. So I think this is clearly the way forward.
Yeah.
One of these, or maybe multiple. I just hope that we don't have to have 25,000 different apps for every single airline and state. I wish that at some point it goes up to maybe 1 or 2 or 3, and so we don't have to change and to upload every single time a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, we'll I agree. I mean, that's why I think the things like Verifly definitely help the airlines and help avoid situations where, if you're in a a BA, outstation that they don't fly to very often, and they are not familiar with the protocol. All the Verify does everything, and then it turns the ring around your profile picture and QR code from red to green. If it's green, they just glance at it and go, everything's been done. It's been verified by a third party. I don't need to ask any more questions. They're going to be allowed into the country. So you mitigate any risk of somebody, and I don't blame them for not being able to keep up with the COVID entry protocols for 50 different countries,
Exactly. And they change every freaking day. I mean,
they really do.
The UK was, for a while, it was just a joke how many times they were changing. I mean, now it's kind of dropping off slightly. We don't have some people say we don't have amber, we only have green and red. Actually, I think we only have amber and red, to be frank, because if you are vaccinated, you considered green, but if you're not, you still have tests and everything. So we have just two lists, go and no go, basically. It's easier, but it's still, a lot of countries do that. Like I just mentioned, Sweden just said, please, Americans, you just don't come here. We don't care if you're vaccinated or not, because the EU gave a no travel to the US about a month ago. But as always with the EU, it's a recommendation, and every country, part of the EU can decide how they implement that. So, for instance, Denmark said only vaccinated Americans. If you're not, even if you have a negative test, we don't want you here. Sweden said no one.
Yep.
They probably change it because it's a bit maybe extreme. And some other, like Spain, said, yeah, you can come test or vaccination. So it's just that it changes constantly. It's really hard because by the time you book your ticket, I don't know, maybe you book your tickets very last minute like I always used to do. But if you book in advance and you never know where it's going to happen in 2 months, you want to go on holidays, and by the time you go to you arrive at 2 weeks before your flight, and then everything has changed. It's hard to follow, to keep track.
Yeah, it really is. It's and the technology will make it better. But as you say, and this is what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
For years. I mean, you look at countries like, most of Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Hong Kong, Korea. They're not even thinking about letting people in yet.
No.
So when they do, they will have all these protocols wrapped around them. So
that was always evident from the first, that Asia will be the strictest in admitting people. I'll talk a bit later. We have a bit less than an hour to go. I'll talk a little bit later about the experience with Singapore, because they have now one of these corridors. Travel. Everybody used to talk about travel corridors in 2020. Nobody does that anymore because none of them ever worked. A little bit between Australia and New Zealand, but it's always often go. But yeah, New Zealand said, I think they want to reach 80 to 90% of locally vaccinated before they even think about opening. They're not there yet, but they're going fast. Australia said 80%. There were some rumors they wanted to let some people come in by Christmas, but I think they've been shut down. So let's see where that goes. And again, let's not forget, sadly, because there's no, I hate to use that term, like natural immunity, because nobody had COVID. Obviously, now that Delta is almost impossible to tackle. Well, they're very, very, very anxious about opening up, because, of course, as soon as you open the door, for people like us, basically, we're the plague ones, it will be risky. So, for instance, Thailand said 70%. They had this Phuket, I think it's called Phuket Sandbox or something, when you could go as a tourist, so you would transit through Bangkok airport, but you were kind of in a secluded bubble type of thing, arrive in Phuket, and you had to stay a minimum stay. And basically, you lived in an entire place that was a bubble.
Yeah. So what's the point?
It kind of worked, but it's still a pain.
Yeah.
Right? It's still a pain. It's not usual holidays. It's a bit difficult. They wanted to open the country on 1st of October, so in 2 days. And then they said, well, it's going to be 1st of November. And they keep pushing it back. So honestly, more and more, I don't see Asia opening between 2022. There were rumors about New Zealand opening in end of 2022, and Australia the same. I don't know, it's just rumors basically. So, but yeah, it's going to be. Sorry, because I keep ranting, but you just said it's going to go on for a long time. I think it's going to be forever COVID. Not in the in the sense that it's going to be as dangerous as it was in the early days. It's already now slightly. That's actually a kind of weird period because it's still a pandemic. It's not endemic. It's like in between, and you're not sure. Like, yeah, things are better, at least in our countries. We cannot judge for countries, every single country in the world. But it's kind of this weird transition because now we have more than 80% of people vaccinated plus 16 here in the UK, for instance, and in Europe has caught up, so it's similar numbers. So it's in between. It works, basically the link between illness and bad outcomes of illness has been not broken but tamed. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of a bit weird period. We're not all looking at each other like, will it hold, or have we seen this movie before? So are we back in September last year, or no? Clearly not. But so it's this weird thing that is going. I lost track of what I wanted to say now because I went into another analogy, but never mind. I think it's the forever COVID. I think we will. Maybe we actually will all get it, but to an extent that we'll get something that is not problematic.
Definitely.
I'm not saying not get it within the next 3 months. I'm saying over time. Mm. Let's hope there's not another variant, because until now it was almost a pattern. Every 3 months we had a new one. It seems that we haven't heard anything. Maybe I don't know. We're not scientists. We cannot judge of anything. But it's a weird period. Like, it's not over, but it's better. Is it quiet before a storm, or is it actually just quieting down? Nobody knows. And that's why as well that a lot of companies are not sending their employees for travel or even back to the office. I've talked to very big companies that I consult with, and they say, Paul, it's not that we don't want to. Some employees want to return to work, at least partial part of the week. It's like last time we did it, we put all these things in place, we put the money into people back to work, and then we were told not to. So this time we're like, you know what, we're not even investing, we're just waiting. And most of them are waiting until 2022 now to make policies about this, because they say, let's open in October, and then 3 weeks later we have another issue. We've seen this movie before, so people are a bit cautious. And of course that affects travel as well. Yeah. And I know that some of you guys that are listening are maybe traveling for business. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but not up to the scale that it used to be, clearly not.
No, I mean, you look at the numbers, and I think people are seeing, when you listen to especially the U.S. airline earnings calls, they're seeing a really healthy rebound in leisure travel, but they're saying that they don't expect a business travel recovery ever, not to the levels that it was. And even now it's sort of 25% of what it was.
Wow. But even leisure, I read, was it during the earnings of Southwest? They said that without further government help, they won't be able to turn a profit in the next quarter. So it's getting better, but it's still not to the, it's still not great yet. There's a disconnect sometimes from people that I'm hearing that are heavy travelers in the US, friends of mine, and are criticizing them. They say, but it's almost back to normal. I say, yeah, but no.
Yeah.
There's the anecdotal when you see a lot of people in the airport, and then is the actual economics of who's actually flying, the big corporates that are sending old people, in first. It's still not happening.
Yeah, I mean, when I flew to Colorado from San Francisco to Denver,
oh, you saw Will?
I saw my brother, and my sister-in-law, and my niece, and
nice.
We flew out of T2 at SFO. Do I mean T2? No, I mean T1. Whatever the Harvey Milk one is, which is this beautiful new terminal, and it was quiet as a mouse. So, wow. And it was I think it was so it was a weekday for sure, a weekday morning, and I was expecting, a lot of movement, and it was quiet.
So I'll tell just one anecdote, and I'll ask you about that specific flight, because you said very quiet. You remember Zip Air? We talked about it, which is this super low cost, kind of low cost by. I think JAL.
Yes, Zip. That's right. I forgot about that. So
they done some. So they had one. I think they only have one aircraft, and they've used it to do cargo because that's where they were making money. They actually had their inaugural flight from Tokyo to Narita to Singapore, which is closed. So they had only a single passenger.
That's depressing.
You're like, I would have loved to be that passenger though, because being on an inaugural flight by yourself would have been cool. So tell us about these flights from Colorado back and forth. Who were you flying with?
Well, yeah. So we flew from, and Megan came because she wanted to meet my brother and sister-in-law, my niece, and she also went to university in Colorado as well. So we had a chance to go around her alma mater, the University of Colorado in Boulder, which was fun. Beautiful. So we flew on Southwest because while I don't think the time or the price was as competitive as United, I'm so sick of United nickel and diming for everything, for like seat and baggage and everything. And they're not good enough to be able to do that. I don't think that's been my experience. And I like Southwest. I have good experiences with them. Anything short of 3 hours is great. And I like their attitude and all of that. So it was this beautiful terminal. The food selection in the Harvey Milk Terminal SFO is just outstanding. No lounge access because the airside walkways to the lounges I could get into, they're temporarily closed because they're doing so much renovation work at SFO. But it didn't matter. I had Filipino street food breakfast because I can.
No way.
It was good. It was a chain from the Philippines whose name escapes me, forgive me, but it wasn't the usual standard American airport fare. There were all of these great local eateries, and the quality was outstanding. It's such a bright, airy terminal, and it was, like I said, it was quiet, so it was just a real joy. And so we went and sat over by the gate, and I glanced out the airplane because, of course, I'm going to do that, aren't I? It's going to be a 737 because it's Southwest. And I look at the engines, I'm like, oh, that's a 737 MAX. And because you can tell instantly because it's got the chevrons on the back of the engine like a Dreamliner. Yeah. And of course the engines are much further forward on the wing, which we'll get onto. And then you've got that beautiful nose cone. It's a very impressive looking airplane. And I nudged Megan. I was like, hey, remember I told you about that airplane that kept dropping out of the sky? She's like, yeah. I'm like, we're going to fly on one. And she kind of looks and I obviously told her about it before. And I wasn't flippant about it. And I just said, no, it's fine. I'm really excited about this. I need to take some pictures. So the Southwest boarding process is unique. We've talked about it before. You are pre-assigned a number, not a seat number, but an order in the queue, A, B, and C, and then I think it's 1 through 50, and you go and stand at these posts, 1 through 5, 5 through 10, so. And we were like A35, so we get on and pick a decent seat, and the flight was completely full. The thing that strikes you immediately as you get on that airplane is the lighting.
Yeah, that's the photo you sent.
Yeah, and I posted it. I really need to post these on something that's not ephemeral, so I'll post them maybe on the Attaché Instagram. But it's this sort of
I should give you the access to Layover's Instagram because I'm not really using it, and we could
I could do that
kind of stuff
too.
is perfect.
That's a good idea. It's Boeing have a name for it, and I can't remember what it was called, but it's something Sky. Anyway. It was a lighting version of the livery of the airplane. So the blues and the oranges and everything like that. And it's got this sort of recess in the ceiling that a lot of the next generation Boeings have, that runs down the entire length of the fuselage. Really striking and impressive. It feels new and modern. Of course, everybody on the airplane, bar 1 or 2 of us, I think were utterly oblivious to what they were flying on. And of course, I glanced in the cockpit, and it was like nothing I've ever seen before. It was like a little mini Dreamliner. Just
I was about to say it must be more Dreamliner.
Yeah,
like
4 screens, hardly any dials or buttons, even overhead, nice. And it just what you would expect, but I sort of, I hesitated for a little bit longer than I perhaps should have during the boarding process because I was just so impressed. The seats were really, really comfortable.
Nice.
And it was, the flight was full. I think Megan was on the window. I was in the middle seat, and this guy sits down next to me.
You're such a gentleman.
Well, we kind of trade off.
Gave her the window. No, I'm just saying, it's good.
I wanted her to be able to see coming against the...
Of course. I'm just saying. It's always been this big debate when you're Nav Geek. What do you do with your partner? I hope it stays that way over time. Megan, if you hear us, tell me in 5 years if you're still doing that or not.
It's not always. She knows how much it means to me. So on certain flights, I take the window. But on this instance, I insisted. And this chap sits down next to me. He's got his earphones in. He's kind of, I think he was on business. And as we're taxiing out, very short taxi to the runways, to the easterly runways, I glance over. I wasn't trying to be nosy or anything, but he's Googling MCAS and reading this New York Times article about the MCAS, which of course is the system that was the
compensating system for the fuselage,
of the Max. And I had said, "Is this your first flight on a Max?" And he said, "Yeah." And I kind of wish I hadn't read that. And he didn't say a lot after that for the rest of the flight. But it was a beautiful airplane. It was quiet as anything.
Oh, that's good, because a 37 is not always a quiet.
No, and we were sat over the wing, or just slightly behind the wing, and it was just quiet as anything, comfortable. You felt like it had I know it doesn't, but it felt like it had the Dreamliner cabin humidity and altitude. I think it's still a little bit higher. And it leapt into the air out of San Francisco. When you come into Denver, and I've never been there before, but Megan obviously had done that a lot, and Will as well, especially. You get really sporting turbulence. Because of it was hot, and you're high, and you're coming over mountains, and you got those mountain rolls, and so you are getting there were some screamers on the flight. Let's put it that way, because you're getting thrown around, and it's an interesting approach because I don't know anything about Denver Airport, but you're making a lot of maneuvers at a low altitude. So even I would say 1,500 feet, you're doing a sharp turn to final, and you're getting buffeted around. So it was actually pretty good fun. But after the flight, I sort of did the 90-second spiel to Megan. Like, what's really interesting to me as an airplane dork about that airplane is how it came to be and how they fixed it, and how they recertified it. And she's sort of like, being she's polite. Yeah, she's humoring me. But I'm glad I got to do it, and I'm glad I didn't plan on it, because you can't tell with Southwest, because they're usually used for Hawaiian flights because they're so efficient. I mean, you look in Hawaii, when you're in Hawaii, you look around and you see a lot of the Maxes, because that's really what they're very, very good at. But it was a very, very impressive airplane. I really liked it. It's, you fly on a Neo, an A320 Neo, and you're like, it's really freaking quiet and really comfortable. It's the same kind of generational leap, I think.
Yeah.
It's the same engines, the LEAP engines on the Max as it is on the Neo, and they're very good engines. But yeah, Denver Airport, by the way, what a freaking weird place.
Yeah, I think when we did it, was it your brother that did it? Because I think so, right? Yeah. I've been, I think on the layover, I forgot now.
Weird, huge place, monolith in the middle of nowhere.
And filled with conspiracy theories. Which they play with, which is fun. Guys, just go back to the episode, I think, with Will. I think it was a year, 2. Wow, a year. What am I saying? 2 years ago? just look for D and Denver because Will is explaining these stories with
such a weird airport,
like dinosaurs and whatever, and it's amazing. And how talking about the Max, so Ryanair has gotten a few. I think its first came in June, so maybe there's a chance to fly it here in Europe. But I know they also broke their negotiation with Boeing, so they were supposed to get like a mega order, and probably because of COVID, they wanted to renegotiate the terms of that order and. Very Ryanair style said, you know what, forget it, we're not doing it, which probably means they're going to do it anyway later. So a few Maxes are in Europe.
And yeah, I there's a lot of them in the US now. You see them often. American, United, Southwest. I don't know if Delta have them, but yeah, very, very impressive airplane. And I'm glad I got a chance to finally fly it.
By the way, I'm pretty sure I haven't been, but I'm pretty sure the Filipino chain you were mentioning is Goldilocks.
That's it.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I remember that from my time in the Philippines. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so I had my Filipino sweet sausage, garlic fried rice.
It's interesting what your reaction about United, how they're nitpicking. I mean, we know that's the sorry for United fans or United employees who are listening, but we know this is always a bit of the criticism of United because it feels like in this kind of people say post-COVID. We're still not post-COVID. We're still right in the middle of a pandemic. It's a different kind. It's getting better. But anyway, let's call it post-COVID for the argument's sake. It feels like that United is trying to do a Delta. They are trying to premiumize, at least as their plan. Maybe they haven't started on the ground. This is why you haven't seen it. But if you read the latest, all the earnings, etc., United is trying to push upwards. Is it for international, at least for domestic, to try to offer better service, better food? And this is why I'm saying they try to be a Delta, because Delta was always the one in the US that tried to attract kind of slightly higher premium passengers. And United is trying to do that. It's a big transformation. I hope they do. Maybe they haven't started, because from your reaction like a few minutes ago, it doesn't seem that they have. Well, that's what I've been reading consistently.
We flew from, because Denver's obviously a massive United fortress. Yeah. We flew from Denver to Vegas on United. And yeah, I mean, it was fun. You know what's really interesting? And I can't figure out what is the cause of this behavior, what the kind of why you would have such different behaviors between two groups of people, what the influence is. So at Southwest on this flight to Denver, which was full, no one got up. No, not a single person got up. Even though you got those preset markers, everybody, you don't get on before you can get on. You cannot.
Okay.
Not a single person got in the line until the boarding announcement was made.
That's great.
Not
I've never seen that.
One person. And then
I would love that, actually.
I wanted to hug every single one of them in a pre-COVID world. And everybody gets in their place, and it's always very like, are you 34? Oh, I'm 32. I need to go. Yeah. And no problem. Everybody gets on board.
Wow.
With the United flight, and not just picking on United, from when I flew from Vegas to LA and then LA to London, but specifically on our United flight, there was just a scrum at the gate when we got even because American and United, I think, somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, on the multifunction display above the gate, it says X minutes until boarding. And of course, people just start to get close.
Yeah, congregate.
And of course, we had a delay. I can't remember what. They were doing ground stops into Vegas because of I don't know, whatever. Doesn't really matter. And so we just sat there because I'm like, this is because on the apps it's like your plane is, and there's ground stops and all that. So we didn't move, but just scrumming around. I'm like, we have assigned seats. There's no point on Southwest. You don't. So just sit the F down.
Exactly.
And the only thing I can think of is that Southwest, you get 2 bags checked for free.
Yeah, of course.
On United, they charge you up the wazoo, and so everybody's jockeying for overhead bin space.
Exactly, but that's the issue. That's the almost the dead end all these airlines have put themselves into, because by doing this, they're forcing people to try to get as soon as they can in flights. And even someone like me, when I was flying business in Europe, I would do that because I was like, I might not have any, and that's silly because you're forcing people to fight for overhead space.
Yeah, it's.
Have you, by the way, because since you mentioned behavior, have you experienced at all in all throughout your flight since we've last talked? And by the way, guys, we haven't talked a lot beyond this podcast, so I'm learning as Alex is telling the story. I've experienced any rage, because that's the kind of news that cuts out of the US every 2 days now. And by the way, the FAA is saying we need to put a stop to this. There's a lot of bad behaviors in flight, of course, in front of gates, people are fighting or shouting, and it's just crazy. I realized we can all realize the pandemic and the restrictions have put maybe people on the edge, etc. But still, I mean, wow. Yeah. Have you experienced anything remotely more aggressive than before, or were you one of the lucky ones that...
I don't think we ran into any of that, although what I have noticed is that irrespective of the airline and their tone of voice in cabin announcements, when it comes to the masks, they are all very, very strict in their tone. Even Southwest, who encourages their flight attendants to have a playful interpretation of the non-safety announcements, when it came to that, they were very strict. And if they were obviously, they could see somebody without a mask on, and they would make a general announcement saying it's federal law.
Oh wow!
But I don't think we saw anything.
Well, good. No, because of course the news filter. But I mean, if the FAA is saying that it's an issue, I think Delta called last week for a national federal blacklist. They want to share names between airlines, and it's really getting out of hand. I mean, I don't know if it's out of hand, but it seems that it's happening every single day, multiple times. The FAA has increased the fines to some crazy amount, but that still doesn't deter people from acting stupidly. I mean, come on, guys, flying is already something that a lot of us still cannot do or prefer not to do. And please, when we get into an aircraft, can we have a proper, nice experience and not having people fight, for crying out loud?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a stressful
haven't Americans stopped even giving alcohol or something on domestic?
Many of them have brought it back, but for a long time, a lot of the airlines stopped because it was just causing more problems than it was worth, and I can understand that. I think it was just pouring fuel on the fire. But now that people are getting more used to it, I think where you have the disconnect is where you're flying from a city or state which does not have any mask rule, and then into an environment like an airport and an airplane where it is federal law. I mean, going from San Francisco, which at a city level still has a mask mandate.
Even outdoors?
Every time we've been into the city, people are wearing masks. I can't remember. I should really know this, but
yeah, it's fine. Just to ask. Because,
but then your mask compliance is not an issue. But then I think when you're coming out of somewhere like not to pick on Texas, but they've had some unusual administrative choices vis-a-vis COVID. That's where you run into problems, I think.
Yeah, of course. I think that applies to, I mean, we've seen this type of stories actually within Europe as well, because there are very different, like curfews. I always hated curfews. We didn't have those in the UK. I hated curfews, the idea of curfews, because you're basically telling people, go to work, but don't have fun, because as soon as it's 6 p.m., just, go back home and don't do anything. Or go to school, for the youngest of you guys. Go to school and then just go back home. And you're like, I'd rather either just tell us work from home and people can have their, make their choices of entertainment. Anyway, but I've heard and read stories like that in Europe as well, where people were not used to different settings or curfews or mask outdoors. We never had mask outdoors mandate in the UK. I find them personally a bit silly, unless it's a very crowded place. Because, I've seen people driving alone with a mask. I'm like, really? But I don't want to. It's easy to be judgmental, so I'm not going to try not to be. I was about to become, so I'm just going to shut up. But it's hard to adapt to other rules. And by the way, that comes to the point, because I'm not going to take along because I want to hear you more. By the way, I'm going to do the other stories about Asia that I had in my mind. I'll do it the next time because let's do a more Asia-centric next time. The COVID pass. Well, the COVID pass are in reality in Europe. So they're very strict. So they're in Cyprus, Greece, top of my mind, guys. Huh? So Cyprus, Greece, Italy, France, obviously, some Nordic countries, I forgot which ones. And if you come from a country that either doesn't have one or you don't know how to even simply get the COVID pass, which is not standardized at all. There's a EU framework. It's a bit difficult. I mean, Italy is the strictest of them all. You cannot do anything. You cannot enter a plane without a proof of vaccination and or recovery and or testing. That's very important. In the EU, when we say COVID pass, it includes testing negative for those who cannot get the vaccine or who haven't gotten the vaccine, and recovery in some extent, in some situations is accepted as well. But anyway, so Italy, let's say you come from the US, you go to Italy for holidays, which is possible. You need to call their special numbers and websites to transform your card into a pass. If you don't do that, you arrive in Italy, basically you cannot do anything because that includes outdoor terraces of hospitality. So you cannot eat out, you cannot dine out, you cannot do anything in Italy. France has done the same. And Greece as well, nothing inside. So that creates a whole, it's not only about the habit of what should I do, but also how do I get the right piece of paper or app to get into these places. And now with the NHS, so this is the UK thing, we can, in most countries, I've tried it. I've tried it, I've not been, but I've tried the various apps. You can easily translate your proof of vaccination into one that is EU compatible, so that's good. But it's still weird. I mean, I always thought that I called it a health visa a year and a half ago that would come for international travel, and that would be very strict. The idea of having something to prove entry to a bar was, of course, something I knew could be existing, but I'm slightly less comfortable with it, to be frankly honest with you, but I get it. It just, and besides my opinion, that doesn't count for shit anyway, it's a reality of travel. So not only you will have to have the right paperwork to enter the flight, to enter the country, but now when you are in the country, to enter various settings as well.
Yeah.
And that's it. In Italy, that includes trains. I mean, it's not only, it's like basically can do anything without such a pass. And Italy went even further because they basically have a vaccine mandate. People will be fired from their jobs if they're not vaccinated. Yeah. So they're probably the most extreme case, if you want, in Europe.
I think.
So, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think. Well, I'm hoping, and I'm mildly confident that we'll find some kind of happy medium of this. And I think most importantly for me, beyond the mild inconvenience for us as these vaccine passport holders, that the onus for basically safeguarding the health of everybody in the bar, restaurant, nightclub, train, or whatever isn't shoved onto some poor frontline minimum wage worker, that there's some innovation that happens that allows just a simple QR code scan validation and,
that's what most of these countries
as
have.
long as they do, and it's not just like, look at it,
Yeah, and probably, I mean, again, you're probably right there. I mean, friends of mine in France tell me if you are, especially not in Paris, if you are like in smaller towns and, they kind of look at it but not look at it. So it's not become like a crazy, minority report type of state when you need to have a proof for everything. And in France, clearly it was done to push people to vaccinate because they had reached a threshold which was pretty low comparatively to other countries. And I know, guys, we're very privileged here talking about that, whereas a lot of countries are still waiting even for the first vaccine shot if they wish to. So, we're talking here as if it's kind of a given now, but that's what they did. Europe kind of did that, I think, mostly to push people to get the vaccine to get out of it. The UK is doing okay, actually, to be frank. I'm not saying we won't have a little wave in October or in January, November, January, I would say, but we don't have any of these tools in place. We're a higher threshold than the rest of Europe, so maybe a higher acceptance of what living with COVID means. I don't know. I don't have an opinion. It's so hard to say what's the right thing to do, but this is what I was saying earlier. It's kind of this weird place where it's not over because you kind of normalize it and you kind of try to get on with it. But it's really hard to know but meaning for travel, for guys who travel, for us, this is an added thing, especially when Asia opens, there will be an added burden of not only having the right paperwork for the flight, for the country, but then also for setting for you and me conference events. Yeah. There will be a lot of this.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I went to Vegas was to do a conference, and it was originally supposed to be 1,000 people in the room, and actually it ended up being 15, and lots of very high quality cameras and broadcast equipment, and because people didn't want to do that. Although interestingly, Vegas, I don't go to Vegas. Well, I do go to Vegas frequently for work, but I hadn't been in 3 years, and it felt busy. You stay in a casino because that's where the ballrooms are and that's where the events are. And I went down and got a cup of coffee one morning. We were staying in the Venetian, and I asked the young lady behind the counter. I said, "Is this busy? Is this not? Where are we?" And she said, "This is pretty busy. Usually around this time of year, it ebbs and flows. You have quiet periods during the day." She's like, "Ever since it's been open, it's been nonstop." And Vegas apparently...
People want to go. People want to escape. Well, it's the only place.
Exactly. And that kind of is the point I was making earlier about it being unique, because it's such a bizarre, strange place that, when you've been cooped up in your whatever you live in America and you want to go somewhere that's not like where you live, where can you go? You go to Vegas, which is at 90% of 2019 numbers. And it felt like it.
Good. But good for them. I mean, good for the economy. And you're next door to California. California was very, and still is very strict comparatively, like New York. They're the two, I think, strictest. I mean, in Hawaii, obviously. So you're just going next door and you have Vegas, and you can have a feeling of normalcy, perhaps, and you want to
I mean, all of the big artists are coming back and doing residencies and everything. And, interestingly, like, funnily enough, Cured did not send me my COVID test kit in time for me to do the test to come back to the UK. So I had to go and get one. And there was a little pop-up COVID testing place in one of the casinos in Vegas I was able to walk down to, and they did it very quick. It was pretty expensive, but it was the only game in town, and that's where we are now. You go and blow $500 on a roulette table while you wait for your COVID test that you just took next door.
Yeah, I think we said that in the start. We normalize some of this the same way we just had the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. We normalize a lot of the security protocols. Whatever we think about those, they're just a thing. You remove your bottle, your shoes, whatever, and now some of the rules change, and over time some get easier, whatever. And I think we'll normalize some of it as well, and that's it. I mean, some countries will be harder. I think Canada wants to have only vaccinated people in flights. Italy, I just said similarly. I'm not sure, because there's still people who simply cannot get it. I don't know, but that's where the direction we're going. I'll talk about Singapore because it's interesting the next time, because I have friends of mine who've traveled. Now there's a corridor, like I mentioned, from Singapore to Germany with very strict protocol. But because we don't have a lot of time, because Alex has to take care soon of his... who's the one who was...
Luke is under the weather, so he's home with me today.
Yeah, so that's why we're not going to do our usual 2 hours, and we'll do another one after my move when I get freaking internet back. But yeah, it's a kind of a different expectations, and I think we'll just normalize it. You'll just go to, I need a test, I'll go to somewhere, and pretty much, I've heard, and maybe you can validate that, pretty much all the airports now have facilities when you can do some type of testing.
Yeah, I couldn't find one at Vegas, which is But maybe I wasn't looking hard enough. And actually, it turned out to be much more convenient to do it, a 15-minute walk. And a 15-minute walk from where we were staying and across the street from one of the best Tijuana-style taquerias I've ever been to in my life.
There you go.
So it's actually a pretty big bonus. San Francisco, in the international terminal, have turned an entire row of check-in desks into COVID testing.
Oh, wow.
And it's a ripoff and it's expensive, so avoid it like the plague if you can.
In Switzerland, because in Germany and France, France, it's still free. It's going not to be free anymore.
That's great.
In Germany, I think it's very cheap or free. In Switzerland, it is free for Swiss or residents. But if you go to a pharmacy and you play nice, they will give it to you.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we have the wonderful system here where, you go to any chemist or pharmacist and they'll give you a pack of 10 lateral flow tests. To get in, we went to a stand-up comedy event at a rum distillery, as one does, in Hawaii. And because I, again, was not vaccinated in the U.S., my vaccination card was irrelevant. And I had to get a lateral flow test, and you go to a pharmacy and you pay like $30 for 2 of them. So I mean, it's expensive, and I dare say profiteering, but
I think what you just mentioned also is interesting. Coming back to what we said earlier about the U.S. opening up. One of the reasons we're waiting for November is also the CDC will decide the exact policy. We know it's for vaccinated travelers, so you'll have to be vaccinated to enter the U.S. Only Americans who are unvaccinated will be still able to enter the U.S. as unvaccinated people and will have to quarantine upon entry. But the type of vaccine, and this, I think we mentioned that in the last episode, that's a bit of this chessboard, because I didn't know about the situation that you just mentioned. You had to be vaccinated within the U.S., but the CDC will probably say Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and actually AstraZeneca, and the WHO, so I think that Sinopharm, will be accepted as proof of entry in the US. That's what's already happening in Europe, actually. You have to be... No, sorry. In Europe, it's one of the... I think it's called EMEA, so that's Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca, and I think Johnson & Johnson now is, so there are 4. Which creates an issue, because if you live in the Middle East and you didn't have a choice, because I think we said it last time, we don't choose which, besides the US, nobody chooses which vaccines they're getting, right? And so I have friends of mine living in the Middle East gotten the Sinopharm, and to come to Europe, they basically are trying to do another round, so they're going to have 4 shots, because they want to do a Pfizer, Moderna, whichever, AstraZeneca, same in Asia, and you're like, I'm not sure it's great for your body, maybe it's fine, I don't know, but that's a bit... I know that Netherlands and Switzerland are the 2 exceptions. Switzerland is not part of the EU, but basically within Europe. They are saying that any WHO vaccine is accepted, so that's good. And I think that should be the way forward. I understand why countries resist. They say we need to test them within our own borders before we accept them. But the problem is that you will lead to this patchy network of how do you get in, which one you get in, and then you'll have to have 25 different shots because you want. That's not good. That's silly. Again, in a world when most people either haven't had the vaccine yet, especially in emerging countries, and will not have a choice of which one. I understand the cautiousness, whatever. But come on, we need a little bit of standardization, because it's not fair.
Yeah.
To limit people or to force them to have another round of another vaccine just for an entry to your country.
It's again, as you say, the standardization, I think, is going to be so critical for travel opening back up again.
Would you get a 3rd shot? You don't have to answer.
Give whatever they'll take me. I'll take whatever they'll give me.
I'm not hesitant at all. I don't think it's actually needed. That's why the CDC has said only 65 plus and people at risk. Little trick: if you're in the US, you want to be considered at risk, just say you're a smoker and you're going to get it. It's a bad idea, but I don't know. In the UK, it's 50 plus, and France has started, I think, whatever. The interesting bit here is that for traveling, is that the Netherlands and Denmark have already said though it could change. I've already said that 8 months after your second shot, you're not considered fully vaccinated. So basically, they fully expect you to have a third shot, which if it becomes reality for other countries, which means that whether or not you want a third shot, to think it's actually scientifically sound to do it, and not saying it's dangerous, I'm saying that perhaps 2 is enough. Well, I will want to travel. I might just do it because
that's going to be the thing, isn't it? Is that this, are some going to require boosters? There's so many just little ifs, buts, and ands, and all of that we're going to have to just get used to.
Yeah, man. I just find that it's a bit. I get it. Again, it's, in my opinion, counts for nothing. But when you still have the vast majority of the planet doesn't have simply supply, we're creating an even more divided world when someone from XY country won't be simply able to come because we'll say, hey, you need 25 shots and you need to be like in, the Matrix, the Matrix, the movie didn't warn us that the reason we were in pods is because we need like a constant injection of antibodies. But there you'll have some people that will simply be prevented from traveling because they won't have the right access in their home country. Not that they're unwilling, but... And that's a bit. I hope that this gets better within the next 2-3 years. But I think it's going to take a little while.
It is going to take a while.
Maybe last before you leave, was there any other flight? Your flight back to the UK? Anything?
No, it was
interesting.
On American, it was fine. Their lounge networks are reopening. It was. I slept for most of the way, but I think I had a fun experience on Friday. I flew a 737 from Gatwick to Luton and then from Salzburg to Innsbruck in the same hour.
Sorry, what? Gatwick to Luton? Come again?
So last Christmas, my father bought me an hour in a flight simulator. And this is the first opportunity I've had to use it. So I drove down to Brighton Airport in Shoreham on the south coast, and they've got a beautiful next generation 737 simulator, and I had a blast. It was so much fun, and learning how to program all the FMC and all of that stuff, because I can fly, I that stuff's fine, but getting it's very complicated. I admire pilots after this, because all of the basically you're just trying to program a very, very complicated VCR to do something, but it was a really good experience. It was virtual aviation. They've got sites all over the UK, and I just had such a great time. It wasn't full motion, but it felt like you were moving, because it's a full, exact replica of a 737 wraparound screen. The graphics are never going to be, Flight Simulator 2020, but they are enough to be convincing, and the flight characteristics and the sounds. Did
you choose the aircraft type, or was it your?
They have. So these guys they got 737, but they also have. I don't think it's at Shoreham, somewhere. They have the world's only Vulcan simulator.
No way.
Yeah. And it's like a full, you got to climb up the ladders and all of that. So the 737 is what they had available. I don't think they have anything else, but it was such a great experience.
My God, I have also been given as a gift something similar, but that's in Zurich in Switzerland. I think it's a 320 Neo. But I haven't been able to, because I don't know. I need to call them to see if it's still valid. I guess I want to do it. They must be amazing, man.
I can't recommend it enough. It was so much fun, and the two former 737 pilots were really fun and friendly and kind and kind of like, I can't. Innsbruck is a very difficult airport to land at, and I got down and they're like, oh, there's something on the runway, go around. So had to go and loop around and do it all again, and it was a grand time. I loved it.
So two words before we finish, because the airport is LIH. So how was that airport? So first of all, what's the name of the airport?
LIH
exactly?
Airport is the name. I think it's named after, and I'm going to look it up now. It's not. So LIH is a town, I guess, in Kauai, which is one of the airlines. It's what's wonderful about Hawaiian airports is they're all kind of partially outdoor.
Outdoor.
So the check-in area is all open to the elements and all of that. You don't walk out onto the airplane. I know in some Hawaiian airports you do, but there were gates here. At 2 runways, very short runways, 6,500 feet each, which is not long at all. And there's obviously a lot of intra-island traffic, which is almost exclusively done by the Hawaiian Airlines 717s. There was a competitor, but they went out of business. And then people like me, 737s, occasional 757, going back to the mainland. If you didn't have TSA pre, the line to go through security was probably 150 people deep. But we had TSA pre, so it was 3 people deep and just marched straight through. You're into this tiny kind of sports hall size terminal with one bar, a tiny little news agent, and a long pier with I think 4 or 5 terminals, and you're away. And like you say, you leap off the runway, and then there's nothing until you get to America, to the mainland. So what you do have a lot of in and around the airport is helicopter activity, because it's such a big tourist attraction to go and fly along the canyon, the Waimea Canyon, where so much of Jurassic Park was filmed, and the waterfalls, which are just inaccessible by road. So yeah, it was acutely. I am completely obsessed with the Pacific now. I can't get enough of the lore and the history and just the facts of it. And my top of my bucket list now is to do that United Island Hopper flight. It was Continental Micronesia before they bought.
Yeah, I was about to say that name now. I know
Continental Micronesia. It's almost certainly United 147 or 174 or something like that. Look it up. It's this crazy. 174. And it's this.
So that's your plan for your next Hawaii trip.
Yeah, if I can find the time, I think that's definitely a pretty solid attaché episode right there.
Yeah, exactly. So that must be, and you'll tell us all about it as well. So I wanted to go to, that was one of my plans before, of course, COVID hit. I had this plan to go to Fiji. I don't know when it's going to happen now, because it's going to be closed until 2034 or something. Welcome to the new world, I guess. But I do have always this mixed feeling when I fly over the Pacific, is that it's so grandiose. You don't even realize when you look at a map of the world, especially the way they're displayed on, like on flat, but it's so huge. And the mixed feeling is like this admiration for it, and at the same time, this kind of, we're totally alone.
It's intimidating. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, you remember when sorry to bring a bad memory for some people, when we lost that Malaysian aircraft, and I mean, how can you find it, right? There's it's this huge amount of nothingness and water and
of space.
Crazy.
Overwhelming almost. And I think that's what struck me, is that we're going to be flying for 5.5 hours and there will be nothing, not a rock, not an island, nothing.
Yeah.
And
these islands are volcanic, and some might pop up one day and some might disappear altogether.
It's awe-inspiring. So that's my latest obsession.
So what's your next flight? You just mentioned you're going back
I'm going back to California for just a few days. And then with the U.S. reopening in November to EU, we can finally start doing some attaché out in the U.S. again.
I was about to say, it's probably one of the only places when it's still, we can do stuff. Europe is going to be okay, but the rest is still...
Yeah, so it's...
difficult. But you have so much fabric to the country, to the US. So
and lots of places that we've always wanted to explore. So
so that would be fantastic. And we don't know what we're gonna record next, because I'm moving, as you understood, guys. I'm moving exactly in a week. I'm not very far. I'm gonna be closer again to Heathrow, as in the pathway, the southern runway, final westerly. So I'm very happy. I'll be able to see from our garden some nifty flights. Actually, I want to give a special shout out to Greg Annandale, because he's gonna fix me to have, like Alex has, an antenna, so I finally have fly radar and all the stuff to actually see what's happening and not simply relying on that, but actually have these ADS or something like that. Yeah, so he's going to fix me that, like with a Raspberry Pi.
Oh, that's what I use. I love it.
Yeah, I just don't want to. I don't have the bandwidth, to be honest with you these days. So he's going to fix that for me. So I'm very happy. So Greg, the email is coming. Whenever I've moved and I've settled a little bit, you'll be explaining that. And when I was looking for Greg Annandale on my contacts, I think I found the other Greg, your Greg Barnes. Is it not his birthday today?
It's got to be close. Yeah.
Right? That's what I have on my contacts. Yep. So I'm not sure if it's correct because, again, I've stopped using Facebook and all these things. So it's probably grabbed the data. So if it's your birthday, Greg, happy birthday.
Yes, it sure is, yeah.
I don't know if you're going to listen to this, but happy birthday, Greg. And again, we don't know what we're going to record next. Probably 3 weeks-ish, but that will depend on Alex. And we'll try to be a little bit more consistent from now on. Not going to promise every 2 weeks, but a bit more than we've done so far. And if Alex ends up traveling all the time, some of you be ready because I might invite just guests to fill the blanks whilst he's with Megan in the US and or with Greg, his other love in the US for Attaché. But we'll try to record another one within next month, hopefully. Whenever I get fiber installed in my place, which I think they need to dig the street or something to have fiber installed, so I need to wait.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's always the good time.
Anyway, thank you guys for bearing with our absence again. Think of this as the Grand Tour specials. We'll be back for another special. I promise you that my side will be more prepared because, as you can see, this time I was like, Alex, please talk, and I was just going to think about stuff to say.
That's like 5 months worth of stuff anyway, so.
And I probably know which airport we're going to do next time because I want to reconnect to the story I was having, my flights from pre-COVID era. And so that's going to be probably Hong Kong, which obviously feels the heart of Alex with a lot of love. So see you next time.
Safe travels, guys.
And let me put the music. Where is it? There it is. Bye! Alex is looking at me. When was it?
No,
30 seconds, man. Yeah, I know. He wants me to choose a shorter one next time. There we go.